talking to you today about Benjamin Franklin's remarks concerning the savages of North America. Now, if you missed it, which I think most of you caught it, the savages he's talking about are the white people, the people who are from Europe or descended from Europeans, not what we traditionally deem savages, the Native Americans. So the savages he's talking about are in fact the Europeans, people descended from Europeans in really, I think, the Hudson Valley. He specifically references at the end a church in Albany, and Ben Franklin did somewhat famously come to Albany, and that's where he learned about sort of the agreement, how the Native Americans govern themselves, and brought some of that into the Constitution of the United States. But that's another story for another time. And I'm coming to you today, once again, from the Martin Van Buren National Historic Site, because long before he was here, there were 98% likelihood, can't say for sure, Mohican Indians here along the banks of the Kinderhook Creek. So just below what you're just sort of off the bank behind me is a little plateau which goes out to the Kinderhook Creek. It would have been an ideal location for an Indian village, beautiful for agriculture, water, wildlife, etc. And of course the Dutch came into the Hudson Valley in 1609 and bought a lot of beaver pelts from the Native Americans, and eventually, of course, took it over from them through treaty and, of course, force, and treaties that were often broken. So I'm coming to you from a spot that was very, very likely a place where Mohican Indians lived, and several different tribes would have done business in beaver pelts in Albany from central New York and maybe even western Massachusetts. So Albany was big on that. In fact, the Catholic Diocese of Albany has a beaver, the Catholic, on their flag, and the flag of Albany, the symbol of Albany, has a beaver on it. Okay, so Benjamin Franklin goes through some of these savageries that he observes, and they're really, to me, very, very interesting and still relevant here, what, 250 years later. I like, and several of you picked out on this, I know Emily and Amanda picked up on this, they're polite to one another. Having few artificial wants, they have abundance of leisure for improvement by conversation. So I love his connection there, and we should all pay attention to this. Since Native Americans, he says, were not materialistic, at least his experience with them did not reveal that, not materialistic, that freed them up to be humanistic, to focus on one another, to converse with one another, to not cut each other off in conversation because they're not in a hurry to go somewhere to make money. They certainly became traders with the Dutch, with the beaver pelts, and often they got guns and sometimes, legal or illegal, alcohol. And of course Native Americans had very little tolerance genetically for alcohol, and it was very, very bad for them, and there's still a large alcoholism problem in Indians in the other part of the country where there are still Indians. There aren't too many around here, though I've known a few in my life. The education part I thought was very interesting. Bella mentioned something about the education. Native Americans didn't like sending their sons to school, which nowadays highly respected and common. We still go to college and make it a top priority. Native Americans didn't value it like we do today. Their sons would come back good for nothing. So it is good to, I love how he calls into question, Franklin does, the usefulness of what these Native Americans learned. They did not learn practical skills at the white man's college. They were unable to bear cold or hunger. They did not know how to build a cabin, take a deer, kill an enemy. They spoke the language imperfectly. They were not fit for hunters, warriors, or counselors. They were totally good for nothing. And you know, we have to admit, and as an educator, someone who spent a lot of time in school as a student, a lot of what we learn and teach is not the most useful things. They're great for the head, but how many of you know how to change a tire, right? How many of you know about basic finance, the difference between a Roth IRA and a traditional IRA? Who's going to teach you that? Finance, changing a tire, basic home repairs, those are very, very useful things that don't get covered in high school nearly as much as they used to. They once did, industrial arts and home economics and finance. So I like, Franklin makes a pretty good point here. And the Native Americans and the Indians made a pretty good point as well about being ruined by education. Now, I don't think education ruins anyone. If you learn to read and write, you can learn to read and write something or read something that will help you do home repair or change a tire. If you become a good critical thinker, you can better figure out personal finance. So you're not wasting your time here, but you need to learn some practical stuff also. Believe me, learn some practical things. So education was very interesting that he brought up. Again, the politeness comes right after that. The politeness of these savages. Now that's just a great line. You have to love Benjamin Franklin's use of the English language. The politeness of these savages in conversation is carried to excess. It doesn't permit them to contradict or deny the truth of what is asserted. And that sort of rolls right into his point about their sort of interest in religion. The Europeans were predominantly Christian. You know, taught them the Garden of Eden story, which we're of course very familiar with. And they finished. The Indian orator said, "Oh, thank you. It's all very good. It's bad to eat apples. It's better to make them into cider. We're obliged to your kindness." So they took a very practical lesson from the Garden of Eden story. And so they found some redeeming quality there, right? Very polite. I'm sure you have often listened to people's stories, maybe some of mine. Very good. Yes, thank you. And you try to find some kernel of something in there that you can highlight as useful. Well, when the white people listen to the stories of the Native Americans, it's dismissed. It can't be true. It's all baloney. If it's not based in Christianity, what's the point, right? What's the point? So that's not good. So we try to have respect for all religions and beliefs. Of course, that has a limit. If my belief is that I'm better than people with dark skin, then that's not a belief that I'm willing to respect. So we don't respect all beliefs, right? So we could get into that much more than we have time for today. Treatment of land. Once again, are we a part of nature or are we apart from nature? And the story that I just mentioned that the natives share is about looking to the land for nourishment, right? Yeah. Her right hand touched the ground, they found maize. Where her left hand touched it, they found kidney beans. Where her backside had sat on it, they found tobacco. The good missionary disgusted with this idle tale. And now this is useful stuff, right? Sacred truths, but you tell me fable, fiction, falsehood. So the arrogant missionary. You know, and I know people have different thoughts and beliefs on missionaries and mission work and Christians going to this day to other parts of the world that are not always Christian and try to do good things, dig wells, and all that's good, but to convert them, I have mixed feelings about that myself. So a lot of bad things have been done in the name of mission work, but a lot of good things have been done also. So I'll let you make up your own minds about that. How they were received, I thought was very interesting. When the white people went into a native village, the natives stood back, let them come in. offered them much hospitality, didn't charge them anything for it. But of course, when the natives would come into Albany or a white civilization, people would run up to them and look at them and, you know, touch their hair. That's a thing today between cultures that's really inappropriate. Find them very curious. So that's really worth a look at. And they're offered, they're listened to, they are learned from, and whatever they have to offer, they offer, as opposed to going to an inn or tavern where we would charge each other. It's a long tradition in cultures to open your home to travelers, so that when you travel, your home's open to them. It's kind of a pay it forward kind of thing, but that is rarely practiced in America. There was always seemed to be an inn, a tavern where you had to pay up. So, such is life. Down at the Motel 6. And of course he ends with this great moment about the natives are trying to make a deal with the white people in Albany for the beaver pelts, and there are pretty strict laws governing that. And they come to a deal here, sort of. They sung the same song, 3 and 6 pence, 3 and 6 pence. That's, you know, I don't know how much money that is, but that was the deal. And then the white people go into church, and of course what they do in church is say, hey, how much are you paying the guy out there? This much. You know what? No. If we all, this is called collusion. It's illegal today, but the white people are colluding, and they're not offering the best price for the beaver. They're all deciding to low ball, to low bid, like, hey, let's only offer them this much. It should be a competitive market. America, capitalism, free markets. This is not free market. This is collusion. This is collusion. So a lot of the things here are still savageries that were concerned. Your comments were good in the discussion board. I was hoping for a little more detail. A lot of you were like, yeah, we look down on other cultures, people different from us. And that's of course true. There are still plenty of regular savageries that we commit. And some of you have heard me go on this rant before. Some of you have heard me go on this rant before. A lot of the clothing that we buy is made in overseas factories in near slave-like conditions. There are examples of clothes that are made for Gap, it could be any company, made in factories in Jordan, in the Mideast, and Jordan brings people in from other parts of Asia, takes whatever paperwork they have to travel, and says, go to work, we're not paying you anything. They can't leave because the people took their paperwork. And Gap, of course, says, we don't know anything about that. Those are just people we buy the shirts from, so they claim ignorance. The way your iPhone is made, you know, the dormitories, the dorms that the workers live in for the iPhone factory, they have suicide nets on them because the work is so hard. Those things are hand built, right? People sit there with these tiny tools making the iPhones. They're not made by robots. That's why it's not done in this country. And you know what? That's why what an iPhone is, what, $600-700? If it was made in this country, it'd be $3,000. You get a cheap iPhone because people are suffering over in China. So, you know, I try to buy American-made clothes. This t-shirt was $18, made in Los Angeles. These pants are ancient that I'm wearing. They're full of holes, but they were made in America. Not my shoes. I'm not wearing a belt. But I try to buy things made in this country. They cost more. They're better built. I can't afford as many of them, so I have less stuff. But a lot of the way things that you own and buy are made is savage, frankly. And it's all so that we can have a cheap shirt. Fast fashion. Look up fast fashion. It's cheap clothes, stuff you buy at H&M, made in horrific conditions, and it's made to wear out very quickly so that you have to buy more. What we do to the environment is savagery, right? We're paying a price for that. So there are all sorts of horrible savages that we continue to commit. And we just kind of go about it because we can't see it right in front of us. So great article. There's still plenty of savages in North America, and we are among them.